travelers, and welcome to Go See, Do Explore.
Here, we dive deep into the heart of travel, sharing hidden gems, unforgettable experiences, and the stories that make each destination unique.
Whether you're a seasoned traveler or dreaming of your next getaway, you're in the right place to get inspired.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh.
And together, we'll set the course for your next great adventure and discover the stories that make each place unforgettable.
It's time to go, see, and do more. Let's explore. Hello, everybody. Last week, we began recapping our trip to Italy. And this week, we have two focuses of this episode. We're going to start talking about our time in Sicily, and then we're going to finish with our short time in Naples.
Should be fun.
Southern Italy. So, as we mentioned on the previous episode, we flew into Catania, which is in eastern Sicily, and this was the one part of our trip that we had a car. So we picked up the car in Catania. We had booked just like a small automatic transmission, like economy car. Right?
Yeah, it was whatever the lowest tier I could get that had automatic, which was maybe not the lowest, but it was like compact or something like that.
So we get there. And the guy behind the counter is like, "Oh, you've been upgraded to an SUV. It's a really nice car. It's a really nice car." If this ever happens to you, in Sicily specifically, but I'm going to imagine anywhere in Europe where you're going to be driving in these, really narrow roads, these really old cities, the correct response is, "Oh, no, thank you."
Yeah. Yeah, it was a small SUV. But it was still pretty big for those streets in Sicily.
Yeah. I feel like by American standards, it was on the small side.
Maybe like Ford Escape. But huge.
Huge in Sicily. And where we stayed in Sicily, we stayed kind of between Aci Trezza and Aci Castello, which are just outside of Catania. And to get pretty much anywhere, we had to drive through these really old cities, really narrow streets, tight corners. And so this car was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. We figured it out, though.
Yeah. And one of our tour guides, I think it was in Taormina, she said, "Did anybody here rent a car?" And, a few people raised their hands. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, there are no rules."
Yeah.
It's like a jungle.
Driving in Sicily was pretty intense, so I did all the driving in Sicily.
Yeah, I was not signing up for that.
I offered. But I got the hang of it. I mean, the thing is, it's just kind of a different system, and I think it's not a written down system. It's a system that I think people drive there sort of intuitively understand, and it seems to work. I mean, we didn't see like a lot of accidents or anything, but it's definitely more of like a self-centered driving universe, and you have to get comfortable with basically just needing to assert your needs at all times and
don't show any weakness.
Yeah. So I got the hang of it, I think, by the end, but it was a little uncomfortable at first.
So we ended up renting a car because we were staying outside of the city. Like I mentioned, we kind of stayed in these small little coastal town, not far from Catania. And we wanted to visit the wineries because this is an area of Sicily that is known for their wine. They grow kind of on the side of Mount Etna, which is Europe's most active volcano. So we didn't want to have to do guided tours to all of the wineries. So we knew that we wanted to have a car. And so that's why in Sicily, we decided to rent a car, whereas the rest of the trip, we kind of got around on our 2 feet and trains.
Yeah, we were definitely covering the most area in Sicily too, like even apart from the wineries. It's just, if you were going to stay in Palermo or in Catania or something like that, you wouldn't need a car, but we were exploring more of the countryside, and there's just not really a good way to do that without a car. So let's talk a little bit about the Etna wineries. Sicily is a great wine destination, and there are distinct regions, DOCs, they have in Italy that all have their own characteristics. We spent our time mainly in the Etna DOC. Etna is characterized by volcanic soil. So as you can imagine, if you have familiarity with wines from volcanic soil, you can expect similar qualities. So the whites are very mineral, the reds are very light and fresh, and they play into that style too. The way they do the viticulture and the way they make wine plays into those characteristics. It may have just been where we went, but Etna struck us as a region where a lot was done in a more traditional and more manual way. We went to one winery, Palmento Costanzo, where I've never seen grapes grown this way. It's a very old style of grape growing where they don't have any kind of trellises. They basically have these trees or bushes that have been cut down to be like a stake. And then they have a single vine trained on this one sort of living stake that's, I don't know, maybe 4 feet high. And so there are no machines that can work with grapes and grape harvesting in this way. And it's 100% by hand. It was a very cool, unique tour we went on. They also have grapes there. The vines are over 150 years old. Is that what she said? Yeah. And so she's very proud of these pre-phylloxera grapes. We've talked about phylloxera before. This insect that eats grape roots. And, in the 19th century, a lot of European grape root stock had to be replaced with American root stock to basically make it impervious to this insect. But in the soils of Etna, high altitude and sandy soil, it is possible to have European vinifera rootstock in the ground because phylloxera is not present. And so we didn't get to try that.
It was way too expensive.
But very cool. And their wine was great. We brought some back. We'll be talking about that in a future wine break, I'm sure.
The other winery that we visited was Nicosia, which is a little bit more modern. Probably my favorite thing about that one was just the food that they served us. I mean, the wine was great, don't get me wrong, but the wine tasting included food. There was like this, what you call it, like antipasto.
It was like an antipasto, yeah. Or, what you might think of as charcuterie, like it was all that good stuff.
Meat and cheese with some fruit.
But yeah, really interesting winemaking in Sicily. Really fun.
So I mentioned a little earlier that we stayed near a town called Aci Castello, which is on the Mediterranean. And the beaches over here are interesting because it's very rocky.
It's volcanic.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, any place you would go where there's like a volcano on the coast, it's going to be like that.
That's true. But so Aci Castello is named such because there's this old Norman castle built into the rock, which was really, really cool to see.
I was this years old when I realized that when they talk about the Normans in places like Sicily, it's not the same as like the Normans you think of in England and France. There's people from Africa. Like, yeah, I feel like an idiot, I guess. But whenever people talked about the Normans in Sicily, I was making false assumptions. So I learned that it is like the people from Northern Africa were the Normans that had that castle.
It's a really cool thing to see. And there were a lot of people hanging out kind of on the rocks outside the castle, sunbathing and whatnot, even though it wasn't a super warm day.
No. It reminded me a little of like the coast of Maine, kind of like, which is, you wouldn't think, but I guess it was more volcanic. It was more like igneous rock and less granite, but it was that same kind of like crazy coastline with rocks in the water and stuff like that.
Painful beaches,
John Hodgman would say.
And so another town that we visited is Aci Trezza, which is right next to Aci Castello, also on the water. And it's Trezza because there are these 3 rock formations out in the water. They call them the Cyclops rocks.
Right.
It's a very interesting site, very beautiful. We had dinner looking out at the
we were the only ones eating.
Yeah.
I was working that week. We weren't just being like typical Americans that were eating too early for Europe. I had a work schedule that week, so we had to select dinner times that were either kind of on the early side or kind of on the late side. And that was an early one where everyone else was just drinking their spritzes, but we were having a meal. What was the name of the town that we always had to drive through to go north?
Aci Reale.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a cool city. I might stay there if I went back to Sicily. It seemed like it had some energy. We were out there. We had dinner out like on the street one night.
Yes.
It was fun.
This was when we had our really late dinner.
That was a really late one. Yeah.
We arrived and they're like, the kitchen closes in 15 minutes. Like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
We'll order real quick then.
But they do this thing in a lot of European cities where they close down a lot of streets, especially in the evening, and then restaurants just put their tables out like on the road and stuff like that. It's really fun.
Yeah, the alfresco dining
Yeah,
is huge over there.
I would do that every day. Maybe not in the winter, but here. But
I wonder what
yeah,
the situation's like in the winter.
I guess it's probably just not that cold there. I don't know. We should go and find out.
I think it is time for a wine break.
Yeah, time for the wine break. We're back for the wine break. We have a special Italian wine today.
Sicilian.
Yes, a Sicilian wine. And this is one that we brought back with us. It's Giusulano, or I don't know, I guess how you'd say it with an Italian accent. Nor am I going to attempt to do that. But it is a frizzante wine. I think we mentioned frizzante when we were recording in Bologna. It's sparkling, but not that sparkling, right? Like these are usually wines. A lot of times, honestly, it comes down to taxation. Sparkling wines are taxed very heavily, typically, because they're a celebration wine, and so they can tax them more. Frizzante means, it's lightly carbonated. When we've talked about wines like Vino Verde, that's another good example of what would be called a frizzante wine. But this is a light sparkling wine from Sicily. We had it at the winery we mentioned earlier, which was Nicosia. It's made from Catarato grapes, I believe is how you would pronounce that, or something like that. A white grape, and it was really, really good. I mean, how would you describe it?
It was very light, a little floral, which surprised me because I don't know that I'd ever had a sparkling wine that had that floral characteristic. But
Yeah.
I guess there are flowers on the
There are.
bottom.
It was perfect for Sicily. It was like this hot day with the sun shining and just like this light, sparkling floral wine. It was really good. So we had some in our tasting and we bought some. It cost a whole €9. Yeah, really challenging wine to buy. And yeah, it was perfect. So this wine, it is Terre Siciliane, which is an IGT. We're not going to spend hours and hours talking about how the Italians designate their wine. But I mentioned DOC earlier, which is similar to what they have in Spain. They call DOC. In France, they call it an AOC. In North America, we have something sort of similar, which we call an AVA. Anyway, it's these regions where the grapes have to be from here, the wine production typically has to be here, and in Italy especially, it has to follow very strict rules to be a DOC wine. Rules that relate not just to the composition of the wine, but also the method in which it's produced. In Italy, they have also something called IGT. We heard a lot about this when we were in Chianti Classico, and I imagine we'll probably talk about this more then. But basically, IGT, all it means is it's from here, it was made here. But they don't have the production rules that they have with a DOC wine. And so IGTs are typically where winemakers can be much more expressive in terms of their own personal preferences and personal styles. Because much like in North America with an AVA, they can make it however they want. And so this means, Terra Siciliana means that it was from Sicily, literally Sicilian land. They make it in Sicily, the grapes are grown from Sicily, but there are no other rules. They can express themselves totally freely. This is one of those wines.
One thing that surprised me when we had this at home is that I feel like it wasn't as sparkling as when we had it in the winery. So I don't know if, that was we brought it all the way from Sicily up to Venice, so it was bouncing in a suitcase over cobblestone. It went on many trains.
It got a little abused. It took a plane over the Atlantic.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's why it lost it, or if it was just different than the bottle, like older than the bottle they served us in the winery. I don't know what that is, but it was still good. I was just expecting something a little more bubbly than what was in my glass.
Yeah. So this is probably not a wine you can find where you are unless you're in Sicily, but I would say look for some Terra Siciliana wine with some sparkling qualities. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It was really good.
When you're talking about Eastern Sicily, one of the biggest tourist destinations is the town of Taormina, which after we've been there is a very crazy place. It's like located on top of this little spindly mountain and you just like drive in. in circles until you get to the top,
Yeah.
like corkscrewy.
And then you park at the first parking structure that you see.
You do not attempt to drive in Taormina.
Yeah.
But it's a big tourist destination for both Italians and non-Italians. And because of that, everything in Taormina is kind of expensive. So that's one of the reasons why we chose not to stay in Taormina.
It really is like a vacation and resort town. In fact, we heard later from our guide in Naples not to go there, basically, because it's not authentically Sicilian, which I suppose is debatable. But we saw some pretty old and authentically Sicilian things.
Right.
So
Right. It's a very cool little town. There are historic buildings. There are beautiful, beautiful vistas to see out onto the Mediterranean.
yeah, the pistachio cannoli that was pretty good.
Yeah. If you don't know this, cannolis are from Sicily. Cannoli, I guess.
Yes.
There's no S in the I is the plural.
Right. It's probably a cannolo, right? Or canola or something.
it's
don't know.
cannolo.
I don't know which.
But yes, so that is a Sicilian pastry. And so we got some of those in Taormina.
We did a walking tour. We liked those walking tours. It was good.
We did learn that apparently during World War II, when Sicily was being bombed, the Americans apparently came to Taormina, declared it too beautiful. And so they avoided bombing Taormina, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But no, it was fun.
Good day trip, especially if you want to see more of Eastern Sicily. I don't know that I would recommend making Taormina your home base. If you're looking for kind of a tourist resorty kind of experience, I'm sure Taormina is fine, but you're going to be paying higher prices.
And I think there are some fancy resorts near there, right? Like if that's your vacation.
And there is a shuttle that will take you right from the airport. You buy a ticket right at the airport and it'll take you right to Taormina. So you don't need to worry. If you do decide to spend most of your time in Taormina, you don't have to worry about renting a car and driving the scary Sicilian roads.
We also went to Mount Etna. We've mentioned Etna a couple times, especially related to winemaking, but it is Europe's most active volcano. In fact, I think it just erupted the other day?
Yeah. Last I saw, it was still erupting.
And when you stay in this part of Sicily, you can see it from a lot of places. You drive around, you see it. But we did the whole experience, which consists of you drive up and up and up to a parking lot, and then you get on an aerial tram, and you go up and up and up some more. And then you get on these crazy 4x4 bus things, and they drive you up even more. And then you walk. You don't go to the main crater. Obviously, that's dangerous. I'd say they don't do that. But they take you fairly near it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if you are wanting to visit Mount Etna, it is important that you check the conditions before you go. Because you don't want to... I doubt when it was erupting and you could see the fire shooting off the top, I don't think you would want to be anywhere near.
Yeah, they have equipment to forecast eruptions, and they'll not take people up if they're concerned. That said, we went on our tour, and our guide was like, oh yeah, we found a little lava in the parking lot this morning. Just no big deal. So, I mean, it's pretty safe. It's probably not the absolute safest thing you could do on vacation, but I think the risk of real danger to your life is pretty minimal. I don't know. I mean, what do I know? But it was fine for us.
Right.
And lots of people go up there all the time.
Yeah. It's, I think, the biggest tourist destination in Eastern Sicily for sure.
It was really cool. I've never been to a volcano like that, especially not an active one. And yeah, it was weird when we were standing. We were at one point standing near this crater, we went into a crater, and it was the ground was hot. It was kind of, I don't know if it was just the dark rock, but it wasn't that sunny that day. I think we were feeling the heat of the volcano. It was kind of cool.
So if you go to Mount Etna, if you want to explore the volcano, there are many, many ways to do it. What we did is it's run by the Mount Etna volcano park or whatever, and you walk right up to the ticket booth and you get your tickets and you go. Nothing needs to be booked in advance. Now on tour websites like Viator, Get Your Guide, there are lots and lots and lots of options. If you want to hike the volcano
with the hard hat and everything,
you can go. You can go farther up than where we went, but you need to have a volcanologist with you.
Yeah,
which doesn't sound like someone that studies volcanoes to me.
It's like they study Vulcan.
Yeah,
like forges.
So there are lots of different ways that you can see Mount Etna. The cheapest way is just to go the main part.
There's a parking lot and buildings and stores.
Lots of very expensive restaurants. for tourists. But you can go and just do the cable car, which is cheaper than adding on the 4x4 bus and the hike and all that.
Don't do that.
When we were planning this trip, I read that Rick Steves says he does not recommend that. And I'm like, I wonder, right, well, we'll do the whole thing. And we get up there, and before you get off the cable car and before you get on the bus, you can see the view. And I'm like, oh yeah, I totally understand why he does not recommend this, because it's not a great view.
Well, right. The view from the parking lot is pretty much just as good as the view up that tram. The tram ride is pretty cool, but it's not even that great of a view on the tram. Like, you really have to go farther up.
No, like the tram that we took in Madeira had better views, I think.
Yeah.
But so if you want to see Etna, like, make it a point to actually do the thing. Take the 4x4 bus, or, go on a guided hike or whatever. Don't just this is not an experience where you should cheap out, I guess.
No, you can also walk up from the parking lot.
Yeah, and those people looked miserable.
It did not look fun.
The last place we visited in Sicily was the city of Catania. So we mentioned in the last episode that we took the night train from Catania to Naples. And so we had some time to kill because our train was at like 11:30 p.m. or something like that. So we dropped off our rental car and put our luggage in luggage storage, and then kind of set off to explore the city of Catania. And there's not a lot out there in guidebooks about Catania. There was one guidebook that didn't even mention it. It's like, oh, you can fly into Catania, and that's all that it said.
Yeah. Rick Steves repeatedly refers to it as gritty, which is not helpful. Having been there, I understand what he means, but for someone who's planning to go there, it's not a helpful adjective.
No.
Like, does it mean it's dirty, or does it mean it's dangerous, or does it mean it's just like the buildings are old? What does it mean?
And I think what he meant by that is that the buildings are old. I think it used to be a pretty unsafe place to visit, but in the past, 10, 15 years, it's gotten cleaned up, so it is safe to visit now. And as our tour guide mentioned, in Taormina, it was bombed pretty heavily during World War II. So I think there's still some of the scars from that.
Yeah.
In Catania. There's not, at least we tried to stay close to this train station. So there weren't a ton of things to do or see in Catania. We just kind of set out walking. And we did discover probably the coolest little tourist thing we discovered was the Greek city.
Exactly. It was Greek ruins that exist under the city. This is common in a lot of places in Europe, that there are sort of layers upon layers of city, and they've been excavating there. The interesting thing there was that it's kind of what you would picture for Greek ruins, except everything is black because they used volcanic stone from Etna, and that's kind of cool and unique. I'll give one travel tip for getting from the airport to downtown Catania. Yeah, so there's a train, which is really nice. I mean, I've said on the podcast before, I'm a big believer of having good, reliable connections between airports and city centers. And so there's a train that you can take from the Catania airport to the main Catania station. The problem is, it's the airport station, but it's probably 3/4 of a mile away, and it's not extremely comfortable of a walk.
There was no shade.
Yeah.
Direct sunlight. You go by like a military base or something. There was like some barbed wire fencing.
Yeah. So we learned after doing this walk that there is a bus you can take from the airport to the train station. So that's a nice thing to know.
There is also a bus that will take you right from the airport to the train station downtown.
I know. I was like,
Catania Centrale.
When I was looking to book, I was like, why would anyone take a bus when you could take the train? But because you have to take a bus to the train station.
Because otherwise it's almost a mile walk in direct sunlight.
Yeah.
In the heat of the day.
I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was kind of like, especially because we weren't expecting that. We were like, where are we going right now? But
there was the signage was not great.
The signage was really poor.
Yeah, it was not clear in advance at all.
So now you know.
Now you know. You don't have to walk in direct sunlight for a mile.
I don't think it was quite a mile.
But I think that's really all we did in Catania. We just kind of walked around.
We had good food.
So one thing we learned on this trip, I mean, people talk about this, but I feel like it didn't really set in for me until we were there, is just how different the regional food in Italy is. Before I move on to Naples, I wanted to talk about the food of Sicily, and specifically the eastern Catania kind of area of Sicily.
Yeah.
So we can't really speak to what the food in Palermo is like, although I imagine it's pretty similar. I know they also have arancini, but it's arancina, not arancino or something like that. But we didn't experience. So we're just going to talk about the food of the Catania area.
Yeah. It was all really good.
Very fish heavy because being that it's on the Mediterranean, it is very fish heavy.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned arancini already, these sort of fried rice balls that we've had many times here in the U.S., and we were looking forward to having them in their traditional environment. They did not disappoint. Those are really good.
Arancini is very good.
Pistachio everything, right, which was really good. I love pistachio, and there's pistachios in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, the pistachios that are grown around Etna are some of the best pistachios in the world.
We had good pizza that I thought was rather similar to Neapolitan style pizza, which makes sense. That's probably what they're emulating there, I would think.
And probably one of the most unique things, which since we've been home, we've tried to find a recipe for, and we can't find anything. And we're starting to wonder if we were having, if we were dreaming or something. But so focaccia in Sicily, we had it in 2 different places. So it wasn't just like one restaurant being, doing something different. It was like a stuffed pizza. It was almost, it was like they made pizza dough on the bottom, pizza dough on the top, and then they filled it and then baked it.
Yeah. And so I've done some research, and I don't know how to explain this really, except when I search like Sicilian focaccia, the recipes I get are the focaccia that we know, like the sort of like kind of airy bread that people put stuff on, which we saw in other parts of Italy. But yeah, I found some things that are to sound similar to what we had that go by different names. So I'm just going to start experimenting and hope that I can figure it out. But that was really good.
Yeah, the first night we were in Sicily, we were kind of dealing with some jet lag. And like we mentioned earlier, Chris was working. We couldn't interrupt his work schedule until it was about
11 o'clock, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like maybe it was like 10:30 that we placed the order. But we did a pizza delivery order. And we had definitely some of the best delivery pizza I've ever had in my life.
It was really good.
Another thing that is from Sicily is limoncello. And I found a love of the limoncello spritz.
Yeah.
Because spritzes are big in Italy. But when we were in Puerto Rico around Christmas time, I tried an Aperol spritz for the first time. And that is just too bitter for me. The Italians love an Aperol spritz. And I just can't. It's not for me. So I loved a limoncello spritz. Unfortunately, that was not found after we passed Naples. But if you're in southern Italy, definitely try out a limoncello spritz. It is quite delicious and very refreshing.
Yeah. Do we have any other memorable food?
Oh, probably the most memorable meal for me in Sicily anyway was after Etna. We didn't want to eat, as I kind of mentioned, there were a ton of restaurants in like the Etna base camp area, if you will. But they all just looked like tourist restaurants, kind of expensive, overpriced hot dog hamburger kind of
spaghetti bolognese.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So we drove a little ways until we came to a little town, and we stopped at this. They called it a pizzeria.
Yeah,
but we never.
They probably did have pizza.
It was. I feel like it was the closest to what Rick Steves describes as like the authentic Italian experience, where it's a handwritten menu on a chalkboard kind of a thing in Italian. Except this place, they never even gave us a menu. They're just like, oh, do you want to try some traditional Sicilian antipasti? And we're like, sure. It was a lunch. She brought out way more food than 2 people could possibly eat.
It was amazing.
It was amazing. We had figs. There was that cheese.
There was a bunch of different cheese, and we couldn't eat all the cheese. And so at the end, we had some left. And she sort of politely scolded us and said that we had to eat this particular cheese because it had come from the forest, and I think it was made with honey from the forest. And so
I feel like this was the one experience in all of Italy where the server did not speak English. So we were kind of communicating with like hand gestures, nods, and then like she got out Google Translate to tell
explain
us
to me
about the cheese.
How important the cheese was. Yeah. And so we ate it, and it was really good.
It was really good. Yeah. The fruits were great. There was, of course, prosciutto wrapped melon, and that was a wonderful experience. And I will put the link in the show notes in case you happen to be looking for a place to eat after you visit on Etna.
Yeah, go there.
It was a treehouse pizzeria or something. Pizzeria of the forest. Something like. All right, so I think it is time to move on to Naples. So I feel like Naples was one of the places I was really looking forward to. Obviously, they're known for their pizza, which we'll get to that in a minute. But so we got off the night train from Catania and we killed time in a coffee shop for a while because our Airbnb, he said we could drop our bags off at 9.
Yeah.
So we hung out in a coffee shop in the Naples train station for a while with all the other Americans. I don't know how we managed to find that. And then we walked our bags to the Spanish Quarter of Naples, which was kind of cool.
We took the subway.
Oh, that's right. We
Yeah.
did take the subway. I forgot about that. How could I forget about that subway experience?
Yeah, we used the subway a lot in Naples.
Yeah, the Naples subway was very convenient. The main station is also the train station. So it was
It was our first contact with Giovanni Garibaldi, who would be our constant companion on that trip.
So we dropped our bags, and the first thing we did another free walking tour of Naples. It was long and kind of hot and very crowded. That was probably my biggest takeaway from Naples, was just very, very crowded. Especially in the historic center of the city.
Yeah.
Kind of where we were staying in the Spanish Quarter wasn't as crowded.
And Naples was the biggest city we went to on
Yeah.
that trip, unless you count Paris, which
Right.
I wouldn't.
No.
So, I mean, definitely. And it's also a city that's sort of known for being chaotic.
Yeah.
Italy in general really loves rules and order. And that's what we were talking about the wine. And Naples, we learned, kind of pushes back against that. I wouldn't say anarchists necessarily, but they like a chaotic lifestyle. They're proud of that. And so you definitely feel that in that city.
And I'm generally someone that doesn't like crowds. But looking back, I think Naples was one of my favorite places. I don't know. I can't really put into words why I like Naples so much. I mean, the food was amazing. We'll get to that in a little bit. I think it was some of the best food that we had on the trip.
And relatively inexpensive compared to other places we went.
Yeah, both Naples and Sicily were on the more inexpensive side for
Yeah.
things.
I mean, Naples, you could go really cheap if you wanted to, though. We didn't, but I mean, you can get a pizza for €2 if you want.
Right. The pizza portfolio.
Yeah.
Naples is also the most busy port city in all of Europe, which I didn't know. That was interesting to learn.
Yeah.
But in the tour, he took us to 2 different churches in Naples.
I don't remember their names, but they're basically across this little street from each other. One is Gothic and the other is Renaissance era. And so they stand across this little street from each other. The Gothic one is very plain, very unadorned, really nice, but very simple. And then the larger one, the Renaissance era one, is extremely ornate. I mean, all the statuary and paintings and all the side altars with all kinds of stuff. And that's the bigger one, and it seemed like the more active and more used one. Yeah. The Gothic one had a lot of history. It was built by the Spanish, the Aragonese, when they had conquered that part of Italy. And so it had a lot of Spanish flair to it. And he told us a funny story about how the Spanish still say that Naples is a Spanish city, which was very in line with our experience of Spain.
And if you ever watch the show on Discovery Plus, Jose Andres and his family go to Spain, he claims that like everything is from Spain.
Including pizza, which makes sense given the Naples thing. But the Renaissance era church was built by the French and was much more in the French style.
And they had a big statue in the Renaissance church to this man who was like a doctor, and he healed all of these people in Naples. And it's a tradition when you go into the church that you shake his hand.
Yeah, that was cool to see.
Yeah.
It was very busy in there.
It was very busy in there.
It was Sunday, right? So there was actually like mass was happening.
Yeah. Which almost seems like they shouldn't allow people to just walk in.
Well, yeah. So like mass was happening in the main part of the church and also in like a side chapel. There were 2 masses happening, and then also all these tourists just kind of walking around. It was weird.
I feel like one thing that I liked about Naples, though, compared to some of the other cities in Italy, it was totally free for us to walk into that church.
Yeah.
Like,
they probably had donation boxes out, but it was all just kind of free will.
Like every other church, granted, there are like bigger named churches, like obviously St. Mark's and Venice. Like those are bigger, more known around the world churches that people want to visit. But like you have to pay admission. It was just nice that you were able to just kind of walk in and see it, and you know, without having to pay admission and get a ticket. That there was no big long line or anything. So that I feel like that might be something that kind of plays into my memories of Naples a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously there were tourists around, but it didn't feel as touristy. It felt like the people that were there, a lot of them were just, that's where they live.
Yeah.
Later in the day, we had our pizza making class, which is probably one of the things that we were
Yes.
both looking forward to the most.
We got
in Naples.
certificates.
Yes.
We got certificates.
Oh, I just realized I put my backpack away with the certificate still in it.
I destroyed it again.
So our pizza chef, his name was Daniele, and he taught us how to make a traditional Neapolitan pizza. And at home, we have a pizza oven, and Chris has been making Neapolitan pizzas for a little while now. So it was nice to kind of see the traditional way to do it,
Yeah.
and you learned some skills.
I've basically, since I got that pizza oven, everything's gone great and the pizza's been delicious, but my crust handling or dough handling, I know, is subpar. It'd be kind of like weirdly shaped and stuff. And so getting like coached on the technique, that was worth the class. It was fun too, but like I've been making pizza at home since we got back, and definitely the crusts are a more regular shape now.
And they also gave us, as part of the class, we got 2 appetizers. One was a bruschetta, which I've never really been someone that likes tomatoes. And let me tell you, I enjoyed the tomatoes on that bruschetta. It was
crazy.
It was San Marzano tomatoes, which I've, heard some Italian Americans like, oh, you have to use San Marzano tomatoes. And like, I thought to myself, like, really? Is it really worth it?
Yeah.
But it is. It is 100% worth it. They actually had flavor.
Those were fresh San Marzanos,
Right.
which you can't, I mean, maybe you could find here in the U.S., but it's probably not going to happen.
I mean, you can buy a San Marzano tomato plant, but it's not going to be the same because the San Marzano tomato is grown in Italy, is grown on the side of Mount Vesuvius. So like we were talking about the volcanic soil in Etna, it's a similar thing.
It's a combination.
Vesuvius.
Yeah, it's a combination of obviously that particular variety, but also the place where it's grown
And the
climate, the soil, all those factors.
And we also had with our pizza, we also got zeppoli, which was also delicious.
Yeah, we're going to make those too. We haven't yet. But it's just you make Neapolitan pizza dough and then you just roll it into little balls and fry it. So we'll be doing that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right? How could that be bad?
It was really good. I have one other food item, the quopo, the cup of fry.
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot.
This is a thing in Naples that you should definitely do if you go. It's I think it's a quopo, like a cup. And it's just like a cone of miscellaneous fried things, all of which are really good. There's like arancini in there. There's one that it's almost like fried macaroni and cheese. They'd probably be mad that I called it that, but that's kind of what it's like. There's a bunch of really good, like, surprising, and that's the kind of thing that if you get it from a counter service place, it's going to be like €1.
Right.
We had it at a sit down place, so it was a little bit more, but yeah, it was really good.
So our second day in Naples, we took a day trip to Pompeii. It was another thing that I was really excited to do, to learn a little bit about the Roman culture in Italy. If you're not familiar, Pompeii is a really interesting archaeological site because it is a city kind of frozen in time. Pompeii was decimated by an eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year AD 79. And so archaeologists are able to look, through their digging, and they can see what life was like in the year 79 AD. Whereas, other sites, they kind of grew with the time, and as people changed, they changed the buildings and things like that. But Pompeii is stuck in the year 79 AD.
Yeah. One thing I learned when visiting Pompeii is I've always wondered, how did they excavate this? Because if it was covered in lava, like that just seems like, how could that be a thing that you like chisel into lava? We learned that it was not covered in lava. It was this really light sort of dust and stone that actually just brushes right away. And it's just there was so much of it that for centuries, people did agriculture sort of on top and didn't really know where Pompeii was, but it was relatively easy to clean out once they figured it out.
Wasn't it discovered by somebody like digging a well?
Something like that, yeah. But another important thing to know about Pompeii is a lot of it has been rearranged, and a lot of it was rearranged by sort of the first people to excavate, who were the Spanish. And it was sort of before scientific archaeology, and our guide said actually that some people will say that scientific archaeology was invented at Pompeii because they learned, as they did this, they learned how to go about it in a way that allowed them to not erase insight. But today, when you walk around, they don't really know what is standing where it was and what has been sort of rearranged or reconstructed. I mean, there's some of it they definitely know is reconstructed, but it's still, I mean, that's not to take anything away from it. It's just something else that I learned there is that a lot of it has been sort of rebuilt. They found pillars laying on their side. They set them back up, things like that.
I feel like one of the fascinating things for me about the Romans in general was their plumbing systems.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that they, in BC times, really, they had running water places. It took a really long time to get that back. It's fascinating. And we also learned on this tour that all of the pipes in Pompeii, anyway, were lead.
Yeah, and that was common in the Roman Empire.
Because they didn't know about the adverse effects of lead poisoning, obviously.
But our guide said that they didn't live long enough typically that it really mattered.
Right. They said the life expectancy was like 35 years. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so.
But we learned that the word plumbing actually comes from the Latin word for lead.
It has a P and a B.
It has a P and a B.
Like the chemical symbol.
Yeah. If you are planning to visit Pompeii, there are some things to know. It is very, very sunny. It is definitely recommended that you bring a hat and you don't buy a hat at the souvenir stand right outside the gate.
Oh my gosh.
It was
€15 hat.
It was a very expensive hat, but it kept me from, burning, catching on fire. So
I guess that's worth it.
I appreciated that with my lemons.
Getting there from Naples, we did actually something kind of interesting. So a lot of people will take the Circumvesuvia, is that what they call it?
Circumvesuviana.
Circumvesuviana, which is this train that does exactly what it sounds like. It goes from Naples and kind of runs around Vesuvius and I think goes down to Amalfi. It doesn't have a great reputation. It's pretty inexpensive, but it's not air conditioned and there are a lot of pickpockets. You'd be fine to take it. There's no real reason not to, but we decided to do something a little bit different. And so we took a Trenitalia, like a regional train from Napoli Centrale to the Pompeii station, which is not there's
Pompeii with one eye.
Yeah,
is the modern.
It's the modern city. And then we were able to buy a connecting bus ticket. I think all this was like €9 per person or something like that. So it was not expensive at all. And for that price, we were able to ride in a modern Trenitalia train that was nice and air conditioned and then just have a little connecting bus ride. It was really easy. I would do it again. And then on the way back, actually, because we had exited Pompeii on the other side, the historic site on the other side, it was not a bad walk at all just to walk back to that modern station. So that's something to know and to look out for. The only downside to that approach is we had talked about going to Herculaneum, and the Trenitalia trains don't really go there in an easy way. At the end of the day, though, we were so exhausted from Pompeii that it was fine. We had no regrets.
I would definitely like to go back to Naples and see Herculaneum.
Herculaneum is just another site that was impacted by this same eruption. But the key difference is this actually was covered with, I don't know if it was lava, but it was some sort of a harder rock. And so there's a lot more that has been preserved, especially in terms of art. And then they also have like bodies, right?
Well, Pompeii has the casts of the people.
Right, that's what it is. So they have skeletal remains.
Right.
At Herculaneum because of this other rock.
So in Pompeii, when the people died, they were frozen in place. And as they decomposed, they just they left a void in the rock. So when the archaeologists discovered the bodies, they poured plaster in and made plaster casts of the victims. So you can see it. It's really morbid. We saw it, but it wasn't like I think they told us you can go to Herculaneum or you can go to the archaeology museum in Naples and see more. And I'm like, I don't need to see more of that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's important to note that a lot of the art and things like that from Pompeii were removed from the archaeological site and are in the archaeology museum in Naples. So once again, something else to go back to Naples for and eat more pizza.
Yeah.
That was our time in Naples overall. I really enjoyed it. The food was so good. If you have time in your Italy adventure, I highly recommend a stop in Naples.
Yeah, you should go. That's all for today's episode of Go, See, Do, Explore. Thank you for joining us and sharing in the wonder of travel.
Keep the spirit of today's adventure alive by checking out our blog at goseedoexplore.com for even more travel inspiration.
Don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps fellow travelers find us and join our community.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and keep traveling by any means necessary.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh, bidding you farewell and happy exploring.